NASCAR is getting a new car in 2026. So the 7th generation NASCAR Cup Series car, the so-called next-gen car, has been racing since 2022. And ever since then, Chevrolet's been using the Camaro as the body its entry is based on. The only problem is the Camaro went out of production in 2023, so even if Chevy wins on Sunday, can't sell any on Monday. They're all gone. NASCAR's rules have allowed it to continue to compete, however, just without any major changes, and it's not allowed to make any unless it makes them to a production car, which you can't do anymore. This also applies to the Xfinity series, where Chevrolet also competes with Camaro-bodied cars. But Chevy does need to make some tweaks to continue to be competitive, and it needs something to sell. Big change this year was that it took the Camaro name off the rear bumper and just replaced it with Chevrolet to promote the brand, not the model. But it finally has a new car coming next year, at least according to NASCAR's head of competition, Elton Sawyer. He was on Sirius XM NASCAR radio this week, and according to a transcript on the Daily Downforce, said, "We started working back with the folks there at GM probably over a year or so ago now. Then they started submitting the body parts, and then they go to a wind tunnel test where all the OEMs, our original equipment manufacturers, are there, and watch how that test unfolds at the wind tunnel." So all the boxes have been checked, and looking forward to seeing the new Chevrolet when we get to Daytona in 2026. Now, what he was talking about is that even though the cars from Chevrolet, Ford, and Toyota have different bodies, they all have to be aero balanced, so they have to meet certain criteria that the NASCAR rules stipulate. What he didn't say was what model Chevrolet's car is going to be, and this is a big mystery. Problem is, now that the Camaro's gone, Chevrolet only makes one car, the Corvette. While that would seem to be the obvious choice, there's a big problem with it. The current Corvette is a mid-engine model, and NASCAR cars have their engines in the front, and while they don't mind fooling around with things like the Toyota Camry, which is not available as a coupe, let alone a V8 powered rear-wheel drive coupe, the basic layout has always been the same. So could you make the Corvette into a NASCAR Cup Series car? Well, there's certainly a lot of renderings online that show that it's possible, although they do all look a little strange. The front end just doesn't work with the rear that's required. So what else could Chevrolet do? Well, the most likely option would be to go with one of its crossover SUVs, either the Trax, the Equinox, or the Blazer. In fact, Chevrolet's already designed a Blazer-based next-gen car, except that it was the Blazer EV and it was electric. It's part of an EV racing car program NASCAR gave a shot at. It designed its own. Ford did a version of the Mustang Mach-E. They've been using them for demonstrations, but haven't pursued a racing series, and probably won't with the way the EV market's going in the US these days. The thing is, even not taking the powertrain into consideration, those cars were very different than the ones raced in the Cup Series right now. They were taller, they had wings instead of spoilers, and it's really hard to see a way Chevrolet can balance one of those against the current Mustang or Camry. In fact, really the only way to do that would be if everyone switched to a crossover design, which isn't out of the realm of possibility at some point, but it's not likely to happen next year. In fact, we've seen the first die casts of Christopher Bell's 2026 Cup Series car, and it's still the Camry. The biggest change there is that they're taking the drivers' names off the rear window header and putting the brand name there instead. So where does that leave us with Chevrolet? Well, it does make an internal combustion engine version of the Blazer, which at least from a marketing perspective might make more sense. And there's a new one coming in 2027. And since a race car is going to be on the track in 2026, NASCAR would definitely allow Chevrolet to use the 2027 production design as a basis. But again, there is the issue of it being a crossover. And while you certainly could put the Blazer face on a two-door coupe body, that's going to be a strange creation. Would fans be into it? Would they even care what it looked like as long as Chase Elliott is still driving one? I don't know. I am pretty confident that they would go with the Blazer though, instead of the Equinox or the Trax. The Blazer is already the sportiest of the three, and has some Camaro inspired design elements, and there's a very good chance the next generation model will be available in a true performance version, since performance SUVs are becoming very popular these days. Aside from that, Chevy's got the Traverse, but that's a big 3-row SUV and unlikely what it will go with. And then it's got its electric vehicles, along with the Blazer EV. There's an Equinox EV and a new Bolt, which is going to be going on sale pretty soon. That's a very small subcompact electric vehicle, however. And again, the EV market just isn't the big focus it was even a year ago. So the chances of seeing a Bolt in the Cup Series are very slim, although you gotta admit, Chevy Bolt would be a pretty cool name for a race car. Now, aside from that, Chevy's got its truck lineup, which it already races in the truck series. Now, I brought up the idea before that since there aren't as many cars on sale these days, everything's SUVs and trucks, maybe the Cup Series should switch to truck-based bodies. I don't see why not. The truck series is pretty popular. Trucks are the best-selling vehicles in the United States. But as with an SUV competing against a Mustang and a Camry, we've got the issue where Chevy just can't show up in the Cup Series with a truck and race against those cars. Everyone would have to go to the truck. It's so dramatically different than a car body. That's just me thinking out loud, however. NASCAR's made no indication that that's something that's on the table right now. Probably wouldn't happen until the 8th generation car arrives, whenever that is. So what other options are there? Well, it's not so far-fetched to think that Chevrolet enters a Chevrolet in NASCAR next year. A generic car that just wears the Chevrolet name but meets these aero regulations. In fact, the first NASCAR next-gen prototype was just a generic body. It had no branding on it. It had no brand style to it. And there are plenty of spec body stock car racing series out there. I mean, I don't see why that would make a difference in NASCAR today as long as the body meets the regulations. It would be weird. They probably would have to change the rules a little bit, at least the way they're worded, but I don't see why Ford or Toyota would have a big issue with that. Their cars aren't exactly the same as their production cars either. Now, there have been some speculations that General Motors would just pull Chevrolet out of this and switch to Cadillac, where it still does make the CT5 and CT4 sedans, which are front-engine, rear-wheel drive vehicles. But Sawyer did mention the name Chevrolet, so it's pretty much a guarantee it's going to be a Chevy. And that brings me to the biggest wild card of all, and the one that gets me the most excited, that Chevrolet actually secretly has a new car model in the works that's going to be launching sometime next year. Now, the company has made it clear that it has no intentions of bringing back a Camaro coupe, although General Motors President Mark Royce did say he could see it coming back as a 4-door sedan at some point, although the last time he talked about it, he was still talking about electric vehicles. Since then, we haven't heard about an internal combustion engine Camaro sedan. But does it have to be a Camaro? A couple years back, General Motors applied for a new trademark on Chevelle badges, a model name it hasn't used in decades. At one time, that was the ultimate muscle car, bigger than a Camaro. And one of the issues with the latest Camaro, as far as sales were concerned, was it had gotten a little too small. It was too close to the Corvette, not as roomy and comfortable as a Dodge Challenger, which outsold it by quite a bit. So if Chevy did come out with a new performance car, it would probably make a lot of sense to upsize it and give it a different name. And since the Camaro is based on the same platform as the Cadillac CT4 and CT5, taking that mid-size CT5 platform and turning it into a Chevelle might not be all that hard to do. Would Chevy actually do something like that? Hasn't said it's gonna, but it also hasn't said it isn't going to. And right now, a lot of things are in flux at General Motors, again, because of this shift away from EVs with the tax credit going away and the market coming back to internal combustion engine vehicles. GM was everybody in a couple of years ago, but now it's rethinking things, and I'd expect it to be a couple more years until it all plays out, which brings us back to 2027, because whatever the new NASCAR car is going to be, I don't think it necessarily has to be something that's in the showrooms today. Could be an updated model, which would likely be a 2027 body. What we do know is that it's going to be on the track next year, which means there's a good chance we're going to be seeing it much sooner than that. There was a rumor that Chevy was going to unveil it at the Roval weekend coming up, but we haven't heard anything official about that. When we do, we will let you know. So like this video and subscribe, and head over to American Cars and Racing Every Day for the latest NASCAR and Chevrolet news.